There was a party near the end of the school year of 2022, and all my friends went. It was at my friend Emily's place, and it was a big split-level house in the suburbs. Most of the people there were either from school or knew someone that I knew, so it wasn't like I was surrounded by strangers. Still, it wasn't exactly my scene. People had been drinking since 9, and by midnight the music was too loud, and the conversations were starting to blur together. I had 2 drinks earlier in the night, and stuck with water after that, since I knew I had to figure out a way home. My parents thought I was staying over at Emily's, but she was already passed out upstairs, and I didn't want to crash there. I checked my phone, and saw that ride shares were scarce and overpriced. That was when I ran into a guy named Josh. I knew him from school, though we were never friends. He'd been in my English class the year before, and he was close with one of Emily's friends. He was the kind of guy who talked too much about himself, but acted like he was joking to cover it up. He'd tried flirting with me a couple of times back then. He made some comments about how I was too serious and needed someone like him to loosen me up. I turned him down politely each time, and he laughed it off, saying I didn't get his humor. He showed up near the door, just as I was about to leave. He said he was heading out too, and asked if I needed a ride. I didn't really want to go with him, but I didn't have any other good choices. To be fair, he was one of the few people that wasn't drinking, otherwise I wouldn't have considered it. He kept saying, "Come on, it's not a big deal. I'm literally going your way." I didn't want to argue in front of people who were half drunk and nosy, so I agreed. He smiled like he'd just done me a huge favor and led me out to his car. His car was an older hatchback with fast food wrappers crumpled in the back seat. It smelled faintly of cologne and something sour, like old soda. He made a point of unlocking the passenger side first, like he thought that was some kind of gentlemanly gesture. I sat down and buckled up right away. When he got into the driver's seat, he started the car and didn't even put on his seatbelt before we started going. At first the drive seemed fine. He asked me about classes and if I still hung out with Emily all the time. He joked that Emily was too wild for me, which felt like a setup for him to say something about himself, so I gave short answers. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the console, like he expected me to notice how cool he was. Instead of taking the left that would have led straight to my neighborhood, he went straight through the intersection. I pointed it out, but he said he wanted to avoid traffic lights and knew a quicker way. I didn't push it, because it didn't seem worth it yet. After a few minutes, I realized we weren't heading toward my house at all. He took a right turn that led towards the commercial strip, where all the shops and offices were closed for the night. The streets were mostly empty, and there was just the occasional car pulling through a late-night drive-thru. I told him this wasn't the way, and he said, "Relax, I'll get you home. I just want to talk for a bit first." His tone wasn't angry, but it was firm, like I wasn't supposed to argue. He pulled into a large parking lot behind a shuttered furniture store. The lights over the lot were dim and spread far apart, and there were no other cars around. He parked in the middle of the row and shut off the engine. My first thought was how far away we were from any open business. It scared me, and I kept my seatbelt on. He leaned back in his seat and looked at me. "You know, I don't get you," he said. "I've always been nice to you. Every time we've talked, I've gone out of my way. I didn't have to give you a ride tonight, but here I am." Then he let out a laugh, but nothing was funny. I told him I appreciated the ride, but that didn't mean I owed him anything. He shook his head and went on about how girls like me always went for jerks while ignoring someone who actually treated them right. He was really laying on the guilt trip, but I was trying not to get into a full argument. I carefully told him that I was grateful, but I wasn't interested in anything beyond the ride. He leaned closer and said, "That's the problem. You put me in this little box, like I'm just here to do favors for you, while you chase guys who won't do half the stuff that I do." He wasn't yelling, but his words had an edge. I realized then that saying no wasn't going to be enough. If I argued too much, he might get angry. If I tried to bolt out of the car right then, it would draw his attention fast, and we were in an empty lot with nowhere obvious to run. I needed him to keep believing that I was listening, at least until I saw a safer opening. I asked him questions, trying to steer the conversation back to him instead of me. I nodded like I was considering what he said, even though I wasn't. My goal shifted from defending myself to buying time and making him think I wasn't about to leave. I glanced at my phone in my lap, but he noticed and told me to put it away, saying it was rude. I slipped it back into my pocket, but kept my hand on it. The conversation circled back and forth for what felt like forever. He kept whining about how unfair it was, that I never gave him a chance. I kept my face calm and answered in a way that wouldn't set him off. Every few minutes, I looked toward the road and saw the occasional pair of headlights passing by in the distance. That gave me a bit of hope. At one point, he leaned back and sighed dramatically, as if waiting for me to give in. Instead, I told him I was tired and had an early morning. I said I was thankful for the ride and that I understood what he was saying. I added that I thought he deserved someone who actually felt the same way he did. It seemed to calm him, at least enough for him to start the car again. He pulled out of the lot slowly, and I kept my hands folded in my lap to hide that they were shaking. As we drove back toward the main road, I made a point of acting casual, as though I wasn't planning anything. When we passed a gas station that was still open, I spoke up quickly. I told him I needed to grab something inside for my mom. He gave me a suspicious look, but the store was bright and had a couple of people moving around inside. I repeated that it would only take a second. He pulled in reluctantly, and as soon as the car stopped near the entrance, I unbuckled and said I'd be right back. I walked into the store fast, but I was resisting the urge to run. The moment the door closed behind me, and I saw the clerk glance up, I felt safer. I bought a pack of gum to make the excuse look real, and then I pulled out my phone. He rolled down his window and called my name, saying we should go. I told him my dad was already on the way, and that he didn't need to wait. That wasn't true, but I wasn't about to get back in. He glared for a moment, muttered something under his breath, and then drove off faster than he should have. I stood outside until the car was gone. Then I got an Uber from the gas station, and it came within 10 minutes. On the ride home, I replayed everything in my head. I kept thinking about how creepy the whole thing was. When I finally got back to my house, I locked the door behind me and sat on my bed for a long time before I could even think about sleep. Lucky for me, he pretty much left me alone after that. I debated telling everyone about it, but it would have been my word against his, and he didn't really do anything illegal, just really creepy. Looking back, I probably should have reported it in some way, just so there would be a record of it, but it's probably been too long now, so it is what it is. About 2 years ago, I took a new job at an insurance company, and I had to move to a different city. It was a big step up for me because I was working retail before that. The office had about 40 people on my floor, and it was divided into little clusters of cubicles. Mine was in the back near the windows, which gave me a view of the parking lot and the strip mall across the street. I didn't know anyone yet, so I usually ate lunch at my desk and spent most of the first week trying not to bother anyone with questions. After a few weeks in the office, I met Jason. He was in his mid-30s, maybe 10 years older than me, and he had a clean-cut look. He always wore a nice button-down shirt and dress pants, even on Fridays when everyone else wore jeans. He had a slick way of starting conversations and seemed to know everyone in the office. One day, he showed up at my desk holding a cup of coffee that he'd made for me. It felt like a nice gesture, and I thanked him, but I really didn't need it. After that, he started stopping by every morning with coffee for both of us. I thought he was friendly without being overbearing, or at least that was how it seemed in the beginning. However, over the next few weeks, I noticed that he had a way of inserting himself into conversations. If I mentioned I had plans after work, he'd ask what I was doing and who I was going with. The question seemed harmless, but there was always a follow-up. If I said I was meeting some friends for dinner, he'd ask where, and then give his opinion about the place. If I mentioned that I'd gone on a date, he'd want to know all the details. "You've got to be careful," he told me one morning. "Most guys don't have good intentions. You're too nice, you'll end up getting hurt." At first, I laughed it off because he reminded me of an older brother type, like he was looking out for me. But it became clear he wasn't just being friendly. If I didn't share enough information, he pressed for it. Once when I didn't want to talk about it with him, he said, "I'm just trying to make sure you're not wasting time on the wrong people." Also, when we were at work, he always seemed to know where I was, and if I left my desk for too long, he'd make a point of coming by afterward to ask where I'd been. It was almost like he was stalking me in the office. Other coworkers seemed to like him though, so I didn't want to make it into something bigger than it was. The turning point came about 6 weeks into the job. I'd begun to settle in with a few of the younger women. We sometimes ate lunch together in the break room, and one Friday a group of us went out for drinks after work. Jason asked if he could join, but I told him it was girls only. Later that night, he texted me a photo of the bar we were at. "Looks fun," he wrote, even though I'd never given him my number. He must have gotten it from someone at the office. After that, I kept conversations with him short and tried to avoid giving him personal details. Around that time, he started giving me a lot of unwanted advice about my personal life. Once, when I mentioned a friend I was hanging out with, he said, "She's not a real friend. She's going to screw you over." He said it in a casual tone, like he was giving me advice, but there was an edge to it that made me uncomfortable. When I began to pull back more, he reacted by talking about me to others in the office. I heard from a coworker that he told people I was cold and standoffish. Another person mentioned that he said I thought I was better than everyone. It was strange because he still acted friendly to my face and still stopped by my desk all the time. Some of my coworkers even seemed distant, as if they believed him. The tension came to a head one night when I left the office late. Most people were gone, and I was walking across the parking lot towards my car. Jason was leaning against the hood of his car, which was parked a few spaces away. He called out, "We should talk," but I kept walking. He followed me a few steps and said, "You've been avoiding me. I don't understand why." His tone was calm, but there was something about being alone with him in the dark lot that set me on edge. I got into my car quickly, locked the doors, and drove away. After that, I made a point of leaving work with others whenever I could. I also stopped accepting coffee from him. He still tried, but I told him I was cutting back. He looked annoyed, but he didn't push, at least not right then. By the third month, I decided I couldn't let things keep going the way they were. I started keeping track of the incidents. I saved the text he sent me that night at the bar, and I told a trusted coworker about what was happening. She admitted that she'd noticed the way he hovered around me, and she encouraged me to go to HR. I scheduled a meeting and explained everything as clearly as I could. It gave me some relief, because at least there was someone trying to help. All the while, I was still hoping this could get resolved without affecting my job. I wasn't even trying to get him in trouble either, I just wanted it to stop. The guy in HR said he'd handle it, and within a week, I noticed Jason wasn't stopping by my desk anymore. He still worked in the same department, but he kept his distance. A few people seemed to treat me differently, but I didn't care as much. The atmosphere at work felt better without his constant attention. One evening, as I walked out to the parking lot, I saw him sitting in his car, but he didn't get out or approach me. He just watched as I walked to mine. I made sure to leave quickly, and nothing happened. Over time, things smoothed out. It took a while to feel comfortable again, but eventually, the office felt like a normal place to work. I still avoided being alone in the parking lot whenever I could, just in case, but Jason seemed to have gotten the message. I was in my second year of college when I met someone named Alex. It was during midterms, and I was spending more time online than I should have. I joined a Discord server for students studying literature, and it was mostly people complaining about readings and procrastinating. Alex was one of the people on there, and he sent me a private message after I made a joke about Virginia Woolf. He said I was the first person he'd seen on the server who seemed smart and actually funny. At first it was nice. He was a little older than me. I was 21, and he said he was 25. He also said he lived somewhere on the East Coast, though he never got specific. I told him I was in the Midwest. I didn't give the city, I just mentioned the weather and the school stress, and he said he remembered college being the same way. We talked about books, classes, and even the weather. He wasn't pushy at the time, just consistent. Every morning I'd wake up to a message from him. Every night he'd say, "Good night, friend, you're the only one who really gets me," or something like that. I thought he was just one of those lonely types who like to talk more than most, and I liked having someone to talk to too. I had a few close friends in real life, but I wasn't dating anyone. My roommate and I got along, but she was always with her boyfriend. I'd go days without a real conversation with someone, so having Alex message me all the time felt sort of comforting. Still, something about him made me hold back. Every message had some mention of how different I was, or how nobody else really cares about him. He'd say things like, "You're my anchor," or "I don't know what I'd do if you ever stopped talking to me." I'd tell him to take it easy, and that I wasn't some savior. He'd say he knew, and then he'd send a heart emoji. After a few weeks, I started replying less, because I was busy with classes and work. I had a part-time job at a bookstore, and was working more shifts. When I didn't answer him right away, he started sending longer messages. The first time he waited a few hours and then wrote, "I guess you're too good for me now. I was just trying to be a good friend." I told him I was just busy, and he apologized, then said he was having a rough week, but it didn't stop. Every time I didn't respond within a few hours, I'd get another one of those guilt-tripping messages. I'm always here for you. I just wish you cared even a little. I tried setting boundaries, and I told him I couldn't talk all day because I had other stuff to do. He said he understood, but nothing changed. Then one day, he mentioned a cafe I'd talked about once. He said he'd looked it up and that it seemed cute. I hadn't told him the name of it, I just said it was near campus. That's when I realized he was probably putting pieces together. Still, I didn't think it was serious because people Google things all the time. After that, I stopped replying for a few days, and I was hoping he'd back off. Instead, he got more intense. He sent messages every morning, sometimes 3 or 4 in a row. He said he felt abandoned, and that I was just like everyone else. I knew at that point that it had to stop, but I didn't know how to end it without making things worse. The turning point came one Friday afternoon in March. I'd just gotten out of class and stopped at the library to work on a group project. Then my phone buzzed with 5 missed messages from Alex. The last one said, "You'll regret ignoring me." I stared at the screen for a long time. My group members were chatting about our presentation, but I couldn't focus. I went into the hallway and blocked him on Discord. Then I blocked him on Instagram, even though we'd never even followed each other. He just found me through a tag story once. I didn't know if he had my phone number, but I blocked any account that seemed like his. For about a week, there was silence, and I tried to forget about it. I threw myself into classwork, hung out more with my roommate, and even went on a date with a guy from one of my classes. I figured it was over, but I was very wrong. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was at a thrift store near my apartment. I was digging through a bin of old scarves when I felt like someone was watching me. I looked up, and I saw Alex standing there. He smiled and said my name. Then he walked over and started talking like we'd just run into each other by chance. I stood there like a deer in headlights for a while. Then I told him I was busy and needed to go. He followed me outside and started talking fast. He said he'd taken a bus from his city and he'd been meaning to visit for a while. Then he said I didn't need to be afraid, that he just wanted to talk. Of course, it helped a lot when he told me not to be afraid. I stopped on the sidewalk, then turned to him and said that I didn't want to see him again and that he needed to leave. He looked shocked, then hurt, and finally angry. He said I'd let him on and that I made him believe we were something special. He even said I was cruel. I walked away and I went straight home, then told my roommate everything. She helped me call campus security, and I reported him. I gave them the messages, the username, the photos, and everything. I didn't go out alone for a while after that, and I was careful. I changed my social accounts and set everything to private. My roommate stayed with me more often, and I didn't hear from him again for a while. A month passed before I got another message from Alex, but this time it wasn't directly from him. It was an anonymous email sent to my school address. The subject line just said, "You were wrong about me." The message was long and rambling. He wrote about how betrayed he felt and said I'd promised something I couldn't give. He said he forgave me, but that he was done trying. I forwarded it to the campus security office. They said the email wasn't threatening, but they flagged it and added it to the report. I didn't reply, and I didn't unblock him either. My friends started treating me differently after that. Not in a bad way, they were just more protective. My roommate started walking with me to class when she could, and one of my guy friends started calling me to make sure I got home okay. I hadn't realized how many people I could rely on until all of this happened.